Malik Bennett was not a detective. He had no college degree, no badge, no glass-walled office overlooking the city's skyline. What he had were two oil-stained dark brown hands that never came fully clean no matter how long he scrubbed them. A 6-year-old daughter who fell asleep in the corner of his garage clutching a stuffed rabbit, and 30 years of instinct built by listening to the sounds engines made when something was wrong. On the morning everything changed, he reached beneath a stranger's car and closed his fingers around a bolt that did not belong to any diagram he had ever seen. He did not yet know that he had just touched the first thread of a $90 million web, or that someone would want him dead before he could pull it any further. What that bolt set in motion would change the way you saw every accident on the road. The garage opened at 5:47 every morning. Not because the sign said so, but because that was simply when Malik arrived. Bennett and Sons sat on the edge of Tulsa's old industrial corridor, sandwiched between a chain-link fence and a tire warehouse that had been half empty for 3 years. The neon sign above the bay door had lost its second S during the previous winter, and nobody had gotten around to replacing it. The roof was tin, the floor was cracked concrete, and every flat surface in the building carried a permanent ghost of motor oil no matter how many times it was wiped down. Malik did not think of the place as sad. He thought of it as honest. He moved through the opening routine the way a man moves through something he has done so many times it requires no thought at all. Lights on, compressor on, radio on. He filled a paper cup with coffee from the machine on the back bench. The machine that should have been replaced 2 years ago but still worked if you gave it a firm tap on the left side before pressing the button. He stood at the window that looked into the garage and let the coffee cool in his hand without drinking it. In the far corner of the bay, tucked between a stack of wheel rims and an old rolling cabinet, there was a mismatched armchair with a patchwork blanket draped over one arm. A small backpack sat on the floor beside it, printed with yellow stars. Malik looked at it for a moment, then looked away. Nia was 6 years old and had her mother's tight dark curls and her father's habit of going very still and very quiet whenever she was thinking hard about something. She had been sleeping in that corner chair since she was 4. On mornings when school did not start until 9 and the babysitter's bus did not arrive until 8:30, she brought a stuffed rabbit named Clover with her everywhere. A small gray animal with one ear slightly longer than the other from years of being held. Clover sat on the armchair now, propped against the armrest, patiently waiting. Malik drank his coffee. Andre Cole pushed through the side door at 6:15 with a breakfast sandwich in one hand and his phone in the other, talking before he was fully inside. Andre had been working at Bennett & Sons for 7 years, which was long enough that he treated the place like a second home and short enough that he still found things worth complaining about. He was 34 and broad across the shoulders and had the particular cheerfulness of a man who had decided not to take anything too seriously. He set the sandwich on the bench and pulled up his phone. Rent Portal sent another reminder. "I saw it," Malik said. 3 months, brother. They're not being subtle. Malik set his cup down and opened the appointment log on the old desktop near the door. 3 jobs that morning, 2 oil changes, 1 brake inspection on a Dodge pickup that had been making a grinding noise the owner described as kind of like a dying cat, and 1 late edition flagged urgent submitted the previous evening, a 2022 Lexus ES 350, rear-ended at low speed, full system check requested. The filing came from a company called Bridgepoint Auto Services. The owner of record was listed as a Raymond Cho. There was no phone number in the contact field. No email address. Malik stared at the entry for a moment, then moved on. Across town, in a building with an actual lobby and climate control, and a receptionist who knew everyone's coffee order, Charlotte Vane arrived at her desk at 6:45. Her office was on the 14th floor of the Meridian Insurance Group headquarters, a glass tower that faced the river. She was 28 years old, which made her one of the youngest department directors in the company's history, a fact that her colleagues mentioned often enough that it had stopped feeling like a compliment. Her title was Director of Internal Claims Investigation. Her job, in plain language, was to find the things nobody wanted found. She had a system. Every file she reviewed got a red pen treatment. Circles around numbers that did not match. Straight lines drawn out to the margin like pulling a loose thread to see how far it would run. The file open on her desk that morning was thick. It had been open for 11 days. The margins were full of red lines. She had written 3 separate memos to her senior vice president over the previous 2 weeks. 3 memos, 3 read receipts, no replies. The name on the door above hers read Jason Whitfield, Senior Vice President. She had worked 2 floors below him for 18 months, and in that time had learned 2 things about him with certainty. He was extremely good at appearing to be in control, and he was even better at not being in the room when a difficult question needed answering. Charlotte closed the file, opened her laptop, and began pulling data from the claims portal. She was not looking for anything specific yet. She was looking for a shape. Patterns did not always announce themselves. Sometimes you had to let the numbers sit in front of you long enough that the shape emerged on its own, the way a face emerges from a crowd when you stop scanning and simply wait. The shape that emerged that morning was not one she had seen before. The Lexus arrived at Bennett & Sons just after 8, delivered on a flatbed driven by a man in a gray polo shirt who worked for Bridgepoint. He handed Malik a work order, pointed at the car, said the client would not be present, and drove away before Malik could ask any follow-up questions. Malik watched the flatbed pull out of the lot, then turned back to the car. It was a clean vehicle, barely 2 years old, dark silver exterior, leather interior. The crease along the front bumper was consistent with a low-speed rear impact, the kind of contact that happened in parking lots a dozen times a day. Nothing unusual. Andre walked around the front end, nodded approvingly at the interior through the window, and went back to his own job. Malik put the car on the lift. He worked from the front, which was habit. Brake lines first, then calipers, then rotors. The brake lines were clean. The calipers showed normal wear. The front right rotor was the first thing that stopped him. He held the flashlight close. The fracture pattern ran from the inside edge outward in a radial spread. Not the blunt concentric cracking of metal that had been struck hard, but the kind of deep progressive cracking that happened when the molecular structure of the material was already compromised before any force was applied. He had seen stress fractures before. He had seen heat damage, wear damage, impact damage. This was not any of those things. This was metal that had been made to fail. He moved the light and found it. The bolt was seated in the front stabilizer mount, occupying a position that should have held a standard Toyota specification fastener. It looked similar enough at a glance. Same general dimension, same thread count at first inspection. But the alloy was different. The shoulder was machined to a different tolerance, and on the flat of the head, etched in characters small enough that you would only see them if you were already looking, was a designation. BPX set. Malik did not move for several seconds. He lay on his back under the car and looked at the bolt and let his mind run through the possibilities in the order a mechanic would run through them. Incorrect replacement during prior service. Manufacturing variant. Aftermarket part installed by a previous technician. He eliminated each one in turn. The position had no service record. The designation was not in any parts catalog he had ever used. And the way it was seated, the way it fit into that specific mount in that specific orientation told him that whoever had put it there had done so with knowledge and intention. He slid out from under the car. Andre was working on the Dodge pickup across the bay, a country station playing from the old Bluetooth speaker on the corner shelf. Nia was still asleep in the armchair. The garage smelled like oil and coffee and the faint diesel drift from the street. Malik took his phone from his pocket and photographed the rotor. Photographed the bolt in situ. Photographed the mount, the surrounding hardware, the VIN plate visible from beneath. Then he retrieved the bolt with a 1/4-inch driver, turned it over in his palm, and held it under the work light. It was heavier than it should have been. The alloy had a warmth to it that standard fastener steel did not. He dropped it into the small tray beside his tool chest and covered it with a folded shop rag. "You go quiet," Andre called across the bay. "That's never good." "Odd weld seam," Malik said. "Nothing critical." It was the first time in 3 years he had said something untrue inside that building. He noticed the feeling of it, the slight friction of it, and filed the feeling away. When the Bridgepoint driver returned at 2, 0 inches the afternoon to collect the car, Malik handed over the keys and signed the release form. He did not write the bolt in the service notes. He did not mention the rotor fracture in the invoice narrative. He described the inspection as complete and the vehicle as mechanically sound for standard operation. After the flatbed left, he locked the shop rag and the bolt inside the bottom drawer of his tool chest. He kept the photographs on his phone and sent copies to his personal email. Then he sat on the shop stool for a long time and stared at the floor drain in the center of the bay. That evening, after dropping Nia at her babysitter's and stopping at the grocery store for the third time that week because he kept forgetting things. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and typed BPX7 Bolt Automotive into the search bar. The results were sparse. There was a supplier database entry for a discontinued fastener series, a technical abstract from a materials journal he could not access without a subscription, and a thread on a legal professional forum, 6 years old, referencing a component designation from a series of fraudulent auto claims investigated in Houston, Texas. Malik read the thread twice. Then he closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen for a while, listening to the refrigerator hum. He went back to the garage the next morning to find the bottom drawer of his tool chest pried open. The bolt was gone. The photographs on his wall-mounted clipboard, printouts he had made before leaving the previous evening, were gone. Nothing else in the building had been touched. The register in the top drawer still held $60 in small bills. The laptop on the front desk had not moved. The only things missing were the bolt and the photographs. Andre arrived 20 minutes later and saw the drawer. "You need to call the police," he said after Malik explained. "And show them what?" Malik said. "An empty drawer?" Andre had no answer to that. Malik pulled up the work order history on the desktop and scrolled back 11 months. He found 2 prior vehicles delivered by Bridgepoint Auto Services, a 2019 Toyota Camry and a 2020 Honda Accord. Both had arrived with minor front-end contact damage. Both had been collected without the registered owner appearing in person. Both work orders listed Meridian Insurance Group as the billing carrier. He had serviced both of those cars. He had signed the release paperwork on both of them. He opened the contact directory for Meridian Insurance Group and dialed the general inquiry line. He was transferred twice, was placed on hold once, and was about to hang up when the line connected to a voice that was direct without being sharp. "Claims investigation. This is Charlotte Vane." Malik paused. He had been expecting a billing clerk. "I'm calling about a vehicle my shop serviced, a Lexus 2022. Your company is listed as the billing carrier on the work order from Bridgepoint Auto Services." There was a brief silence on the other end. "Can you give me the submission date on that work order?" He gave her the date. He heard typing. "I don't have a Bridgepoint submission matching that date or that vehicle description in our active queue," Charlotte said. Her voice had changed. Not dramatically, but enough. It had gone careful. "What's the name of your shop?" "Bennett and Sons. Malik Bennett." More typing. "Mr. Bennett, the technician who completed service on this vehicle, was that you personally?" "Yes." "Did you retain a copy of the signed release documentation?" "I signed the form they brought." "I didn't get a copy." Pause. When she spoke again, her tone had leveled into something deliberate and precise. "I think we should speak in person." Charlotte arrived at the garage the following afternoon in a gray blazer and dark slacks, her hair pulled back and her expression neutral in the way that people who do investigative work learn to keep their expressions neutral. She looked at the space with the assessing quality of someone cataloging details without being asked to. Andre, who was torquing lug nuts on the far side of the bay, watched her walk in and then looked at Malik and raised both eyebrows. Malik set 2 coffees on the workbench, paper cups from the old machine, and pointed her to the stool across from his. She opened a laptop. He opened his tool chest drawer, reached to the back, and set a second bolt on the bench between them. She looked at the bolt. She looked at him. "You had 2, she said. "I photographed the one I found in the Lexus, before they took it. I didn't have a second physical sample until this morning." He slid a folded piece of paper across the bench. "I remembered the Honda Accord. When I pulled the archived order, I found my own service notes. I'd flagged an anomaly in the stabilizer mount, wrote it off as a prior repair. I went back to my old storage bins." He tapped the bolt. It had been sitting in a jar of miscellaneous hardware for 8 months. Charlotte looked at the bolt for a long time without touching it. Then she opened a folder on her laptop and turned the screen toward him. 23 claims, she said, filed through Meridian's Tulsa regional office over the past 18 months. All single vehicle incidents, all occurring at night or in low visibility conditions on high-speed corridors, all with one consistent pattern. The registered vehicle operator was either absent at the time of the incident or sustained no significant injury. While the vehicle itself was written off or declared a total loss, she paused. Total paid out across those 23 claims. $14,700,000. That is 3.4 times the historical average for this region. Malik looked at the numbers, and my car was number 24, except number 24 never had its accident. She closed the laptop. Because you pulled the bolt before the vehicle left your bay. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had arrived at the same conclusion from different directions and were now standing in the same place looking at the same thing. The component, Malik said. What does it actually do? Charlotte had spoken to an independent materials engineer before driving to the garage. She described the answer the way the engineer had described it to her. The BPX-7 was a modified load-bearing fastener manufactured from a heat-reactive alloy that maintained structural integrity under normal operating temperatures but degraded rapidly under sustained thermal load, the kind generated by driving at highway speed for an extended period. After somewhere between 150 and 200 kilometers, depending on ambient conditions, the fastener would fail without warning. No dashboard indicator, no audible signal. The stabilizer mount would separate at high speed, which would cause catastrophic loss of directional control, which would look to any investigator exactly like a mechanical failure following an impact. The insurance company sees a wrecked vehicle with documented prior service and a plausible mechanical failure point, Malik said, and pays without pushing back because the paperwork is clean and the failure mode is consistent with the reported incident. Charlotte turned the bolt over on the bench with one finger. The shops they use for service do not know what they are servicing. The drivers who deliver and collect the vehicles are contractors. The registered owners of the vehicles are either fictional or are private individuals paid a fee to lend their identity. By the time any investigator looks closely at any one claim, there are 4 layers of intermediary between the payment and the person who authorized it. Who authorized it? Charlotte did not answer immediately. I have a strong hypothesis. I don't have a direct evidentiary link yet. What I have are 23 data anomalies and a chain of approval records that move unusually fast through one specific authorization tier. She looked at him. Every single one of these claims was approved within 48 hours. The average approval time for a comparable claim in our system is 12 business days. Malik picked up the bolt and held it in his palm the way he had held the first one, feeling its weight. You said you sent memos upstairs. 3 of them. And nobody answered. Somebody read them, Charlotte said. Nobody answered. His name was Jason Whitfield, and he had held the title of Senior Vice President at Meridian Insurance Group for 9 years. He was 51 years old, wore suits that cost more than most of his staff's monthly rent, and had the particular stillness of a man who had learned a long time ago that the first person to raise their voice in a room lost the argument. His office was large enough to hold a conference table on one end and a sitting area on the other, and the view from the window faced west, so that on clear evenings it caught the full width of the sunset. He learned about Malik Bennett on a Tuesday morning in a call from a logistics manager at Bridgepoint who reported that the technician at Bennett & Sons had held back a component from the Lexus, had subsequently contacted the Meridian switchboard, and had been transferred through a misdirect that was still being investigated to the Internal Claims Investigations Unit. Jason listened to this information without changing his expression. He tapped the surface of his desk 3 times with 2 fingers, a measured rhythm. Then he said, I want a comprehensive background on that garage and the owner, and please communicate to our friends at Bridgepoint that their continued contract status will depend on how cleanly and how quickly the situation is normalized. He ended the call and went back to the document he had been reviewing before it came in. Malik came to the garage early on a Thursday and found the bottom of the side door had been pried. He stood in the doorway without going in. Then he went in and checked the tool chest. The second bolt, the one from the Honda Accord, was gone. He called Charlotte before Andre arrived. She answered before the second ring. They came back, he said. I know. Check your email. He checked it on his phone. There was a message from a number he did not recognize. Sent at 2:14 inches the morning. No subject line. The body of the message contained only one sentence. Stop pulling. Think about the girl. Malik read the sentence 3 times. He folded his phone face down on the bench and sat with both hands flat on the surface and breathed steadily for a while. He was not a man who frightened easily. He was a black single father in his 30s who had spent years learning how to stay calm in rooms where panic only made things worse. He was a man who had been frightened before and knew what to do with it, which was to take it apart and look at each piece separately until it became manageable. The threat was real. The people who made it knew where his daughter went to school. They had been inside his building twice without leaving a trace. They had resources, and they had patience, and they had already decided he was a problem. If he stopped now, they would not know that. They would know only that the problem had become quieter, and quiet problems had a way of becoming dangerous ones. He picked up his phone and called Charlotte. "I need to know exactly what we're dealing with," he said. "Everything." They met that evening at a diner 3 miles from the shop. Charlotte took the booth in the back corner and sat with her back to the wall. She had a folder and a laptop and a yellow legal pad with 2 pages already filled in her narrow, precise handwriting. She laid it all out for him across the table in the flat, steady voice of someone who had rehearsed the presentation enough times that she could give it without the emotion showing. The 23 Tulsa claims were not isolated. Over the previous 3 years, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division had flagged a pattern of identical structural characteristics across 67 total incidents spread across Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and 3 cities in northern Texas. The bolt designation, the vehicle delivery mechanism, the rapid approval cycle, the shell company ownership structures, all of it was consistent. The total estimated payout across all 67 claims was $90,400,000. Malik sat with that number for a moment. 67 accidents, he said. "None of them were accidents," Charlotte said. "And the 2 vehicles I serviced before the Lexus are part of the count." He looked at the table. "I signed off on those cars." "You inspected them accurately," Charlotte said. "The components were installed before they arrived at your shop. Your service documentation is clean. You were being used as a layer of legitimacy, not as a participant. I was part of the machine." Charlotte did not offer a softer version of that. She simply continued. "The FBI has enough to build the financial case. What they need is physical evidence connecting the modified components to a specific point of origin, and more importantly, to someone with the authority to approve the payout chain. Right now, the money trail runs through 3 shell entities before it touches any individual. That is deliberate." She looked at him. "You are the only person in this entire investigation who has held one of these components in his hand and can place it inside a vehicle connected to a Meridian claim. That testimony is the link that makes the financial data usable in court." Malik said nothing for a long time. The diner was quiet around them. The only sound was the low murmur of the kitchen and a television in the corner playing a weather forecast. "What happens to my daughter if I do this?" he asked. Charlotte looked at him steadily. "There is a protective protocol that can be arranged through the FBI's regional office, but the most effective protection for both of you is to close this case before it extends further." She paused. "The network is growing. When it grows large enough, they will eventually need an accident that involves an occupied vehicle. We don't know when that becomes acceptable to them." Malik looked at the condiment rack on the table, at the small laminated menu leaning against the napkin dispenser, at the ordinary objects that populated an ordinary diner on an ordinary evening. "Tell me what you need me to do," he said. The FBI contact Charlotte had been cultivating for 3 months was a man named Cameron Holt, who worked out of the Financial Crimes Unit and had successfully prosecuted a multi-state auto fraud ring in Dallas 4 years earlier. He was 42, compact, and had the unhurried manner of someone who had learned that patience was a more reliable tool than pressure. He met Malik at the garage on a Friday morning, walked through the space with quiet attention, stopped at the corner armchair where Clover sat waiting for Nia, and said nothing about it. "You understand what you'd be agreeing to," Cameron said. "This will not be comfortable, and it will not be brief." "I understand," Malik said. "They've already made a direct threat. That changes the exposure level." "It does." Cameron looked at him. Most people would have stopped after the drawer. Most people had not already signed 2 work orders. Malik said nothing. The plan was precise and depended on timing. Cameron had cultivated a secondary contact inside Bridgepoint's delivery operations, a scheduler who had grown uncomfortable enough with the arrangement to cooperate under immunity. Through this contact, a new service appointment would be routed to Bennett & Sons, a 2021 BMW 5 Series. Same profile as all the others. Same delivery mechanism. Malik would receive it, perform a documented inspection, and this time would complete his service notes fully, noting the component, its location, its designation, and the condition of the surrounding hardware. He would sign nothing until a Bridgepoint representative was physically present in the garage to witness and co-sign, creating a direct chain of documented responsibility. Simultaneously, Charlotte would use her director-level credentials to pull a bulk export of the full claims processing logs going back 30 months. A data pull large enough that it would require executive-level authorization to block, which meant that if anyone tried to stop it, the attempt itself would be recorded. And there was one more piece. Charlotte had received a folded paper note slipped across a desk by a young woman named Aria Bloom. Aria was 26 years old and had been Jason Whitfield's administrative assistant for 14 months. She was not involved in the fraud. She was involved in the proximity of it, which had turned out to be its own kind of trap. She had overheard enough to understand the shape of what was happening, had stayed silent because she was afraid, and had finally reached the edge of what her conscience would carry. When she heard Jason give the instruction about Malik Bennett's daughter, she had saved 22 seconds of audio on her personal phone. The recording was incomplete, the audio quality imperfect, but the words were clear enough. Jason's voice, the name Bennett, the phrase "take care of it cleanly," and an explicit reference to the child. When Charlotte called the number on the note, Aria answered on the first ring. The BMW arrived on a Wednesday at 7:55 inches the morning, 14 minutes ahead of schedule. Malik noted the early arrival but said nothing. The driver was a man Malik had not seen before, not the usual gray polo contractor, but someone younger with a watchfulness to him that was at odds with the routine nature of his supposed errand. The man's name, according to the work order, was Miles Garrett, listed as a senior technician from Bridgepoint. Miles did not leave. He stood near the bay door with his phone in his hand and watched Malik begin the inspection. Malik moved through the process the way he always moved through it, front to back, top to bottom, methodical and without hurry. He had a recording device the size of a shirt button mounted in the housing of his work light. Cameron was in a van 2 blocks away with a live audio feed. Charlotte was in the Meridian building on the 14th floor with a USB drive and the longest 30 minutes of her professional life ahead of her. Malik found the component at the left rear stabilizer mount. This time it was not already installed. It was in a small Ziploc bag tucked inside the wheel well, placed there with the expectation that Malik would find it, say nothing, and install it. The bag also contained a second, smaller bolt and a folded instruction sheet printed on plain paper with no identifying marks. He photographed everything without moving any of it. Then his phone rang. The number was blocked. He answered. The voice was male, unhurried, and utterly flat. Maple Creek Elementary, Blue Door, East Side. There's someone there who knows what your daughter looks like. Malik held the phone at his side for 3 seconds. He was aware of his heartbeat. He was aware of Miles watching him from near the door. He was aware of every square foot of the garage around him and every decision available to him in that moment. He pressed the phone to his ear. "Thank you for letting me know," he said. He kept his voice level. He ended the call. He walked to the corner of the bay and turned his back to Miles. He called Andre. "Go to Maple Creek right now. Park outside. Do not let Nia out of your sight until I call you." He did not wait for a response. He sent a text to Cameron with 2 words. School. Now, Cameron had 2 agents in plain clothes at the east entrance of Maple Creek Elementary within 8 minutes. The individual observed near the door was identified, photographed, and moved away from the property. Nia did not know any of this happened. She was in her classroom, drawing a horse, when the world outside briefly became dangerous and then became safe again. Miles, back in the garage, had seen Malik's expression change and recover. He moved toward the lift. "Everything all right, Mr. Bennett?" Malik turned around. He looked at Miles with the particular steadiness of a man who had decided not to be afraid of the thing trying to frighten him. "Everything's fine," he said. "I'm going to need you to sign the inspection acknowledgement form when I'm done." Miles hesitated. "Standard procedure," Malik said. "New policy for Bridgepoint vehicles. Insurance requirement." He held up the clipboard. He had written 3 lines at the top that described in precise technical language the component found in the wheel well, its location, and its part designation. Miles looked at the clipboard. He looked at Malik. His hands moved slightly at his sides. "Right now," Malik said, "you can sign this form and walk out of here and let the people above you handle what comes next. Or you can walk out without signing it, in which case the men outside will want a longer conversation with you." Miles looked at the bay door. There was nothing visible outside. The street looked ordinary. "There's a vehicle parked on the north side of the building," Malik said. "There's another on the corner of Fitzgerald. You probably didn't notice them because they look like panel vans, which is what they are." Miles picked up the pen. At that same moment, Charlotte inserted a USB drive into the port of her workstation, typed her authorization credentials into the export prompt, and initiated a bulk pull of 30 months of claims processing data. The system accepted the command. She watched the progress bar begin its slow crawl across the screen. She heard footsteps in the hallway. The door to her office opened, and Jason Whitfield stood in the frame. He was wearing a charcoal suit and an expression of calibrated concern. He looked at her screen. He looked at her face. And he closed the office door behind him. "I've heard," he said, "that you've been coordinating with federal investigators. That's a significant departure from your authorization scope, Charlotte." She did not look away from the screen. The export was at 31%. "I've been doing my job," she said. "Your job is internal compliance, not federal coordination. When internal compliance fails to produce a response to documented irregularity, external escalation is within the mandate of this department." Bhavendra Sishasan. You can reference the Charter Section 9, Paragraph 3. I know it by heart if you'd prefer. Jason stepped further into the room. His voice dropped in a way that was not quieter, but denser. "I want to be very direct with you. This path you're on will damage this company. It will damage the people in this building who have done nothing wrong, and it will certainly damage your career." "That's a comprehensive list," Charlotte said. Bafenjaloshi. "But it doesn't include the 67 people who filed fraudulent claims, or the $14 million paid in Tulsa alone, or the individuals whose vehicles were structurally compromised without their knowledge." She turned to face him. "You should leave my office, Mr. Whitfield." Jason looked at her for a long moment. Something passed behind his eyes. Not anger, not fear, but calculation. He left. Charlotte turned back to the screen. Bavenjabashaba. The hallway outside was quiet for 2 minutes. Then it was not quiet. There were voices. Footsteps that moved with purpose, and a sound that Charlotte identified correctly as someone entering Jason's office at the end of the hall and asking him to remain where he was. 97%. The export completed at 3:14 inches the afternoon, the same minute Jason Whitfield was informed by Cameron Holt's colleagues that he was being detained pending federal inquiry. Aria Bloom had delivered the audio recording to Cameron's office that morning by hand. The 22 seconds of audio, combined with Charlotte's export and Malik's documented inspection evidence, gave the FBI what they had needed for 6 months. Jason said nothing when they put the cuffs on. He looked out the window of the parking garage. The west-facing view was not available from this level, and he kept his expression as controlled as he had always kept it. The only indication that he understood the completeness of what had just happened was the way his jaw tightened slightly when the second cuff clicked into place. Malik received the text from Andre at 3:22. "Got her. She is eating a cone chocolate, wants to know why you are crying." He was not crying. He was standing in the middle of the garage with his phone in both hands and his eyes closed. And for a moment, the only sound was the country station still playing from the Bluetooth speaker and the distant traffic from the street. It was one of the quietest moments he had known in a long time. He heard footsteps on the concrete. Charlotte stood in the open bay door. Her blazer was wrinkled in a way it had not been that morning, and a strand of hair had come loose from the pin at the back of her head. She was carrying a USB drive in one hand and had the expression of someone who had spent a very long time pushing against something and had just felt it give way. They looked at each other across the length of the garage. "She okay?" Charlotte said. "Eating chocolate ice cream." He paused. "You?" "We got the export." She held up the drive. Everything. 30 months. Every approval. Every authorization. Every override. Malik nodded slowly. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The afternoon light came through the open bay door at a low angle and spread across the cracked concrete floor in a long rectangle. Somewhere outside, a car passed, and its radio was playing something neither of them could quite hear. "I have terrible coffee," Malik said. "If you want terrible coffee." Charlotte looked at the paper cups on the bench. She put the USB drive in her jacket pocket. "I think we earned something marginally better than that. There's a diner 3 miles east." "I know the one," she said. 3 weeks later, Jason Whitfield was formally indicted on 34 counts encompassing insurance fraud, money laundering, obstruction, witness intimidation, and conspiracy under organized crime statutes. 8 additional individuals connected to Bridgepoint and the Internal Claims Processing Unit were charged alongside him. The proceedings were expected to last through the following year. Meridian Insurance Group placed its entire senior leadership structure under independent review. The board appointed an interim executive team and issued a public statement. The Internal Claims Investigation Department was placed under direct board supervision, a structural change that Charlotte had included as a non-negotiable condition of her acceptance of the new role they offered her. Her new title was Chief Legal and Compliance Officer. It was the kind of role she had not imagined for herself at 28, and she accepted it with the quiet certainty of someone who understood exactly what the responsibility meant and why it needed to be done carefully. On her first day in the new office, she sat at the desk and looked at the blank notepad in front of her. No red circles. No lines pulled to the margins. She picked up her pen and wrote one name at the top of the page, studied it for a moment, then capped the pen and set it down. Aria Bloom gave a full cooperating statement to federal investigators and was extended immunity in exchange for her testimony and the audio recording. She left Meridian voluntarily the same week, took 2 weeks away from everything, and came back with a job offer from a nonprofit legal aid organization that had reached out after reading a brief mention of an unnamed internal witness in a regional news article. She did not take the job for the recognition. She took it because it was the first time in 14 months that she looked at what she was being asked to do and felt no hesitation at all. The garage opened at 5:47 as it always did. Malik stood at the window with his coffee and looked out at the lot, and at the street beyond it, and at the ordinary movements of an ordinary morning. A delivery truck. A woman walking a dog. A kid on a bicycle adjusting his backpack strap before pedaling away. He drank the coffee while it was still hot, which he rarely did. The legal settlement that came through the following month was large enough to clear the remaining rent debt and service the equipment loans and leave a modest margin beside. He did not change the sign. He ordered the replacement S, but found when it arrived that the gap where the letter had been had become familiar enough that filling it felt unnecessary. He left the new S in the box under the front desk. Andre came in at 6:15 with a different breakfast sandwich from a different shop and announced that he had started making his own coffee at home and it had improved his mornings by 40%. Malik said that was good to hear. Nia arrived at 6:40 with Clover under one arm and her backpack swinging from the other, wearing rubber boots with frogs on them despite the fact that it had not rained in 2 weeks. She climbed onto the armchair, arranged Clover in the crook of her arm, and looked around the garage with the satisfied authority of someone surveying their domain. Baba, she said. She used the nickname she had always called him, the one her late mother, Simone Bennett, used around the house when Nia was a baby, and the one he had answered to ever since. Clover wants to know what's different today. Malik looked at her. Nothing's different. Something is. She was studying him with the particular concentration she deployed when she believed adults were not telling her the complete truth. You smiled when you were making coffee. You never smile when you're making coffee. I'll work on looking more miserable, he said. She considered this, apparently satisfied, and turned her attention back to Clover. That evening they sat on the front steps of the house, which was small, and in a neighborhood that had been halfway through a renovation project for approximately 5 years, with no visible end in sight. The yard needed cutting. The third porch step had a crack that Malik had been meaning to fill for 2 months. None of this bothered him in the way it once had. Nia was telling Clover about a caterpillar she had seen at the edge of the school garden and speculating on the specific kind of butterfly it would eventually become. Her voice was matter-of-fact and unhurried, the way children's voices are when they are speaking to a trusted audience. Malik's phone lit up on the step beside him. Charlotte Vane. He looked at the name for a moment. Who is it? Nia asked without looking up from Clover. Someone I work with, he said. Good work with or bad work with? He picked up the phone. Good, he said. I think... He pressed answer and stood from the step, walking a few feet out toward the yard. The conversation was short. Charlotte had a question about a detail in the documentation timeline. He answered it. She thanked him. There was a pause after that. The kind that did not require filling. And then she said, How's your daughter? Good, he said. Currently explaining butterfly biology to a stuffed rabbit. Charlotte laughed. An actual unguarded laugh that he had not heard from her before, and that was briefly and inexplicably the best sound in the quiet street. "That sounds about right," she said. After the call ended, he stood in the yard for a moment. The last of the evening light was sitting on the top of the fence line. Somewhere in the block behind the house, a lawnmower was running. He went back and sat down on the step beside Nia. "Done?" she said. "Done." She leaned against his arm. "Will you tell Clover a story? She's been waiting all day." He looked at the sky, which was going the deep particular blue of 8, 0 inches early fall. The kind of blue that does not last long and is worth noticing while it does. "Sure," he said. "It's about a bolt." Nia made a face. "A bolt?" "A very small bolt," he said, "that changed everything." She thought about this. Was it magic? "No," Malik said. He settled his arm around her shoulders, and Nia leaned in, and Clover stared forward with patient glass eyes into the deepening evening. "It was just in the wrong place," he said, which turned out to be the same thing.